episode 106 of School Librarians United. I'm your host, Amy Herman. Happy New Year! It is 2021, and I'm so excited that you are here today. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 14th year, I found myself asking the question, where is the podcast that will help me do my job? I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and by listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast is something for you. I'd like to extend a very special welcome this week to listeners, Jessica in New Jersey. Gail in Connecticut emailed the podcast and over the break, and I asked if I could share her feedback, and Gail wrote, I discovered your podcast this summer. I have become an avid listener. Yesterday, as I was driving, I listened to your conversations with Kitty Feldy about virtual book clubs and with Tom Bober about serving on the Caldecott Committee. I was spellbound. You are doing a wonderful job choosing people to interview and subjects to talk about. Your podcast is helpful in so many ways. It is both practical, giving me much needed information, and inspiring, providing new ideas to try. I am an elementary school librarian in Connecticut. I think we are all reeling a little bit from all the changes the pandemic has brought to our world. I find myself asking the question over and over again, what are my most important roles in this situation? Which keeps shifting. As a school librarian for my school community. Thank you for helping me explore some really good answers to this question. I just had to write to tell you how much I appreciate your work, your well thought out questions, your knowledge, and the wisdom of your guests. Sincere thanks for providing such a treasure. Kathy in Rhode Island wrote, I just wanted to say thanks for running the podcast. As I did my video messages last spring for the kids, I realized how hard it is to talk and not get any immediate feedback. I give you a lot of credit. Running a podcast is not for everyone. I've been an elementary school librarian for about 22 years, and this podcast is like a shot in the arm. It reinvigorates me and holds me accountable to make sure I'm doing my best. So anyway, thanks for helping a profession be the best we can be. Shelley in Florida reached out to me on Facebook and was kind enough to let me share this with listeners. Shelley wrote, I stumbled onto your podcast in late summer when I Googled school librarian interview questions. I had an interview via Zoom, and I thought I should prepare for what might be an unusual, not in-person interview. At 52 years of age, I am a new media specialist at a Title I elementary school in Florida. I had previously held a K-12 educational media certification, but in the intervening years, I only looked for positions haphazardly and then let it lapse. Your podcast is a goldmine of information. I listened to it during my commute. I hope you consider additional newbie episodes or even an episode on new to you libraries when you change jobs. I was shocked at the personal and professional hoard I inherited at my library, and I wondered, how common is that? It's literally akin to buying someone's house and that person just leaving all their crap behind as if they just went to the store for some milk. Anyway, I digress. Thanks again for being a wonderful resource. Enjoy the holiday. And I do have to tell you, Shelley, that episode is coming. It's going to be, I think, at the end of January. It's called Inheriting a Mess. And I've wanted to do this episode for quite some time. You're right. When we walk into a library, it doesn't matter how fantastic the person was who left it. There is going to be a lot of challenges in that. And I can't wait to post that episode. It's coming and it's in the works. I promise. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions either on Facebook, Twitter, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. Before I get started with today's episode, I did want to put out not one, but two all calls for anyone who's interested in being a guest on the topic of, first of all, one school, one book. And it's kind of a tall order because I need to be convinced about one school, one book. So if you'd like to do this episode, please come prepared to argue why these are fantastic programs and should be implemented in every school, because I'm not convinced. And then the second I'll call is for somebody who would like to speak on the topic of book processing, barcodes, spine labels, stamping books. Again, this is also a listener request, and one that I think needs to happen, because when it comes to things like processing books, these are big decisions that we have to make. And if you don't have a lot of background, or you're not sure what you want to do when it comes to book processing, this is a really important conversation to have. So please reach out to me if you're interested in either one of those. And now for our episode, Pro-Advocacy and You, and my conversation with Tiki Love. Tiki Love, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited you could join me. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Pleasure being here.
I'm so grateful that you're here today, because I feel like it is absolutely critical that we remind ourselves just how important advocacy is to all of us. And so I really am grateful that you were able to take some time out of your break before you go back to school. Can I ask, do you start back up tomorrow?
Yes. Yes.
Face to face? Are you virtual? Hybrid?
We're virtual right now.
Okay. We are going to be hybrid, face to face. So we will see everybody, but in half doses. We'll see half of the staff or half of the kids every day. And it really is a solution, but not everybody. No one is happy with any of our solutions for different reasons. So, yeah.
Damn.
All right. Well, listen, Tiki, let's get started. Could you tell me a little bit about your current library? I appreciate that we're teaching virtually, but tell me a little bit about your school, where you're located, just so we can appreciate where you are.
Okay. So I'm at a middle school. It's a magnet school. We have 4 magnet programs in our middle school, and we have we probably have over 800 students right now. So less than 900, over 800. Variety of students from various backgrounds, great school community. And I work as the library media specialist at the school. This is my 3rd year in the school that I'm currently at, Loch Raven Technical Academy. And I've been in Baltimore County. So this is where it gets funny, because I really can't remember. It's either this is my 25th year or my 26th year. It might even be my 24th. It's one of those. And I just love working in the middle school program with the students and the teachers and the staff. So
it's great. It helps me a great deal, because, when I talk to school librarians around the country, it really does make a difference of the perspective that we bring, how many years we bring to this conversation, because the longer I'm a librarian, and, the more people I meet, it's just fascinating to see how the years add up and how much we bring to this conversation doing that. So, let's start addressing this issue of advocacy. There are days that I feel like I'm advocating for my collection and my budget, and there are some days that I feel like I'm fighting to keep my staff, or I'm defending my library's physical space, as other programs need, floor space to create other programs for our school. Some days I have to prove to the staff and the administration that I'm relevant. What would you say requires your most attention when it comes to advocacy in your library?
So I would say advertising the school library program, and also advertising what I'm able to do as a school library media specialist. So specifically advertising what we're able to do, whether it's working with the teachers for lessons to help them switch them up a little bit, to flip them or blend the lessons to include technology, or working with the students to help curate and locate resources they can use for research, various projects. And then also working with students to help them. Right now I do something called book matching. So with students that are, reluctant to or not very much into reading, to help them realize that there's always a book that meets their interests. So I don't downplay their interest. If they have a hobby, then I try and find a book that relates to that. If they enjoy listening to a book that's an audio book, or they like ebooks, then I'll find a book that relates to that. And I put all those together to match them up with their perfect book, or books, really. And then also talking about what I'm able to do with them or work with the school community, because I like to, show the various things I'm able to do in regards to getting resources and different things that relate to those different styles of learners and the needs of the teachers in the classroom. So it's really just advertising, and it seems as though every year and every quarter and every week I have to advertise. And I will have to say this, and I'm going to mention a little bit later, I think, the whole idea of advertising outside the school community, what it is that I do and what school librarians do too. So that's important as well.
Got it. I sometimes feel like we are either authors trying to sell their newly published book, or I feel like a real estate agent who's that mantra, always be selling. And
Mm-hmm.
I am always selling my program. I'm always advertising, and sometimes you sit back and say, God, I'm so tired of trying to prove to people that what I do matters. But the truth of the matter is, if it doesn't matter to us, then we might as well just go home.
Right.
That's especially the case right now when so many of us are teaching virtually. We're teaching remotely and supporting so many of our students and staff. And we just haven't physically seen them in a very long time. Trying to remind them of all the things that we can do is a very proactive, responsibility on our part. Could you tell me, was there a defining moment when you realized just how critical advocacy was to protecting your job and your program in your school?
So I'm going to share quite a bit when I talk about this. There's actually several times. So years ago, I went to a conference, and I forget because they've switched the name of it, but I believe it was called Common Ground. So that was probably like 10 years ago. And a librarian specialist, I can't remember his name, he made the comment after his presentation that, in essence, and I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember exactly what he said. I just remember how I heard it. But he said we needed to make sure that we got the word out about our positions, or else we might not have that position. And that shocked me because I was like, who doesn't need a librarian? But it was true. So then years later, and I can say this, I'm fine. I had an administrator, and this was probably a while ago. It's not my current administrator. It's not the one I had recently, but I had an administrator who had the idea of switching up my flexible scheduling to making it almost more like an elementary school schedule, to where teachers would come to me from social studies on a Monday, and then language arts on a Tuesday, and then math. Well, not even math, because I don't think the principal saw a library working with math. But each day, the principal wanted to have a different content area come to me. And I was saying, well, when would I be able to work with? What if the language arts wants to do something on this Thursday? And then, no, and they would be able. And also, the big part of it was that the principal saw it as a time for the teachers to take a break. So they wouldn't be in there. We wouldn't be co-teaching. It would be a lesson that I would just create on my own and just give it to them, similar to what they do for elementary, which is great for elementary. For middle school, it's not necessarily what's going to work. So that was jarring. That's your word I'll use. Jarring for me, because it almost felt as though I didn't have a say in the scheduling that was going on. And part of that, and that's part of the passion that I have for advocacy, was because I hadn't advocated for my position ahead of time and shared the different things that I was doing. And I'm very much an introvert, which people find interesting, but I am an introvert. So I wasn't advertising the things I was doing in the school. So the principal didn't have a sense of what I was doing, what I could do. And so I just had to, what's the word I want to use? Do several things to tweak that. And luckily things worked out. But now that's part of the big reason why I'm so passionate, because I realized that. And then also just seeing other school systems. I can be specific, like in Pennsylvania area, there are some schools that don't have librarians, and the things that happen in that school system as a result of it. And then also what was happening in DC last year, where they were thinking about changing the language of what was needed for a school to have certified teachers and who they felt was essential. So those things always play into my mind when I think about advocacy and protecting our profession and our programs, because I know how important school libraries and school librarians are. It's so many defining moments.
Well, and I give you a great deal of credit because, it's very frustrating to be reminded of how precarious some of our circumstances are. And yet, in some respects, people just sort of knuckle down and say, that's okay, I'm just going to do a good job. But, doing a good job is not enough. And unfortunately, if a third grade teacher becomes complacent, and decides I'm just going to coast, I'm 5 years away from retirement. As long as I keep my head down off the radar, I'm in, I'm good. Okay. There is no coasting for us. Mm-hmm. There's no that's okay. I can sit back. I'm going to do my job, stay off everybody's radar. It's quite the opposite, actually. Mm-hmm. I want to, give some focus to our conversation, and that is with your state organization, the Maryland Association of School Librarians. Do you call it MASL?
MASL, yeah.
MASL. It is referred to as MASL. Okay. And you belong to the Advocacy Committee. Could you share with us, because it's a committee, it's not a committee of one. You work with other talented and very helpful school librarians in your state. Could you share with us who else you work with on this Advocacy Committee?
Okay, so the Advocacy Committee, we call ourselves the A-Team. We just came up with that before the break. So that's Tim Stillman, who's in Calvert County here in Maryland. And then we also have Marianne Fitzgerald. She's in Anne Arundel. And I probably I always say it wrong. I think I said it correctly that time. So both of them are wonderful. And all three of us, we do various things to get the word out about different advocacy efforts, ways that librarians in the state of Maryland can have their voices heard, whether it's clicking a link and sending a comment or a letter to a representative or just someone in the House of Representatives or Senate, right before bills are determined, to let them know about the importance of school libraries. And then also we've done 2 presentations where we talk about pro-advocacy and the different things that relate to that. So can I take a moment to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. This is you. You have the floor.
So just to give you a little bit of background, pro-advocacy is the idea of being proactive, not reactive, which is similar to what Stephen Covey talks about in the 7 the effective ways of being a leader. And so in essence, you don't wait for things to happen and then react to those. You have to put things into place ahead of time before you necessarily need it, and you're on the defense. So with that, it's about, getting the word out about what you're doing as a school librarian, whether it's using social media, talking to your principal, your teachers, PTSA, students, and getting the word out about what you're doing as a school librarian. And then also working with various stakeholders, whether it's your principal, the superintendent for your area or for your office, the different libraries, the different content areas, department chairs, etc., about the importance of the school library program and what you're able to do to connect with the issues that they see and that they want to work on, and how you can connect that to those. So how you're a team builder, stakeholder in those efforts. And then also the third part is having an elevator speech, which can be a variety of things, whether it's face-to-face, online, coming up with an essay, a poem, doing something. If you do a TikTok, whatever creative way you do your elevator speech to get the information out about what your school library program is, then we're encouraging people to do that so that they're more pro-advocates and we're getting the word out about what their programs can do.
I appreciate the leadership that is so important and vital to motivating school librarians because, it seems like we're so overwhelmed with the day to day. I remember thinking in the first few years of being a school librarian, I couldn't even do my job well, let alone brag about it to my administrators. I felt like that, just trying to get through my day, and I just felt always perpetually overwhelmed. The idea that now on top of that, I had to broadcast all the important things that I'm doing, and it really seems incredibly overwhelming. So I want to try not to use that word so many times in this episode, but it's truly what I feel about when it comes to advocacy. Could you please describe for listeners the activities that are recommended in MASL's PROAdvocacy program?
Yes, I can. So it's a great effort on the part of the A team. Tim and Marianne have two elements that they created and came up with, and then I had the third. So the first one, Tim talked about the idea of looking at what the community needs. So you talk to your principal or the PTSA, even students can be part of it, teachers, and find out, put together, what the community wants, with what are some issues that they see, things that they're trying to work on at that point, and then putting that together with the library program. So say, for example, you might have the need for reading, let's say literacy to increase and the number of students to increase in their scores for reading. So that might be the goal of the school, the principal, et cetera. So then what is it that you're doing? How is it that you're helping the students who might not be at the level where they should be to enhance them as readers, whether it's the different types of books that you have, the programs that you do to engage them, et cetera, getting parents in, et cetera. So his big thing was talking about what the community needs and then connecting that with what the school library has. And then Marianne was a bit more specific, where she talked about thinking about also nationally and also with the school, what is it that the school library can do? So whether it's EDI and making sure that you have diverse and inclusive texts that show or reflect different schools and students. So it might be making sure that you have books that reflect Indigenous people, books that reflect Chinese or Chinese Americans, et cetera. And then making sure that those things are what you're using to draw your students and your teachers in. And of course, connecting it with curriculum, because that's the big part as well for us. But the big thing is just making sure that we're engaging our readers, whether it's the students, the parents, the teachers, or all three. And then for me, the big thing was I shared the idea of doing an elevator speech. So with that, what you're able to do is just have the basics to what you need to do to create an elevator speech, where it's no more than 5 minutes of what your library program is doing and how you're helping students, whoever you're speaking to, whether it's the parents, the students, the principals, superintendent. You can even use the elevator speech. And we're trying to encourage this before School Library Month at a board meeting, school board meeting, so that people are realizing and thinking about what school libraries do. And then definitely, if you want to share that elevator speech via social media, create a video with pictures or, examples of what you're doing with the students to show the importance of your school library program. But the big thing is that you can pick one or all three of those things and then go from there.
No, I think that's fantastic. And I do appreciate that there is a strategy involved when you reach out and you work with your building initiatives and support your administrators. And, I think that sometimes we have a rather polite approach to where we fit into the school building. And, you sort of see ourselves in this library space and it's, I'm going to be in this library space. And, the truth of the matter is that our impact goes far beyond the immediate walls. And we're seeing that especially this year, now that so many of us are teaching and supporting our staffs virtually. So, I think the idea of us coming directly to our administrators and wanting very much to have a seat at that table and to have those conversations. And I think as I've gotten older and have more years experience as a school librarian, I am more readily available to sort of interject my role into, say, the conversations that the literacy team is having. I feel that if I have a way that I can support, especially programs that might have not considered me a team player, I want to make sure that they see where I can make their jobs easier. And when my elevator pitch has sometimes boiled down to just being support everyone. And when I created sort of an infographic of what I do and I see these infographics, especially at the end of the year. But friends, we've talked about we don't need to sort of arbitrarily wait till the end of the year to remind everybody of just how important we are. And creating these infographics where we can, succinctly narrow it down to what precisely it is we do. And I summed it up in 2 words. I simply said, support everyone. And I know that may not be your elevator pitch, but I found that it really did address just about every, and then obviously you can break it down and make it far more detailed from there. But supporting everyone does not just extend to our students, but it also includes all of our support staff and all of our administrators and our district level. And recognizing that we have that potential is something that comes as you get this better grasp of our space and of our collection and where we are in our school community, and only making that a bigger sphere of influence. So, obviously, these activities and initiatives are the kinds of things that librarians outside of Maryland could employ. Would it be possible to include in our show notes the resources that your advocacy team has assembled?
Yes, it is. So we have a newsletter. We have a s'more that we created, I think it was almost 2 months ago, that highlights some of the basics, the 3 pillars that I just talked about. And then also has links to different things that AASL and ALA have created in regards to advocacy. They have so many wonderful resources. That's a great way to go. And then also we have a hashtag, a challenge that we created to encourage people to just get the word out about what they're doing in their school libraries. So if people want to use MASLMD challenge, it's hashtag MASLMD challenge. And then just share, different things, whether it's on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of the above, just to showcase what they're doing in their school libraries. And that would be ongoing. I know that during the month of School Librarian Month, a lot of people do different things where there's different hashtags during that month specifically. But this was created so that we're continuing to have the conversation and to get the word out about what school librarians are doing with students and teachers and staff, et cetera.
Well, and I do, since you've mentioned social media, I want to mention something that I've noticed, especially on Twitter. I'm horrible at Instagram. I'm sorry, everybody. Maybe I'm just an old fuddy-duddy. But when it comes to Twitter, especially, I've noticed that there are some librarians who are particularly generous in their retweets, that they will lift one another's things that they're doing and showcasing them on their circles of influence. So, when I have followed people on social media, a lot of times they are retweeting something that a fellow school librarian did in their district. And you may think, oh, I'm just, I want to help my friend. I like my friend. And I want to make sure that they know I see the things that they're doing. But we really are making our voice that much bigger when we support one another across our district. It's not enough that I promote myself and my program. That is not going to save the school librarians in our district. It's important that all the school librarians in your district are supporting one another when we put things out on social media, because you need, and I think I saw this to a very large extent with Casey Boyd and the plight of the DC school librarians over this past summer, and the sort of very unified effort that they demonstrated in really ensuring that their programs were seen and were valued by the decision makers who were going to decide whether or not these school library programs were going to remain intact. So it's not just about promoting our programs, but it's about promoting our entire district and what we do for all of our students across our districts and for our entire state. School librarians were already confronted with the challenge of public's misperceptions of the many roles that we provide to our school community prior to the pandemic. Do you feel that the opportunity for advocacy is easier now that we're working through a pandemic?
So originally I would have thought it was, and now I will say no. So the reason why I originally thought it was is because, we definitely are needed. But currently the thing that I'm facing specifically is in the virtual setting, and I'm definitely for the virtual setting because we are in a pandemic, not having that face-to-face interaction with the students and the teachers does affect, getting the word out about my role a little bit more. So I have to tweak in my brain because I have figured out different ways to make sure that I connected with the students and the teachers and the parents. So now virtually, because I'm not here or there to see them face to face or go to the classroom and visit a teacher during their planning or, the faculty meetings and share, specifically what we're doing and engaging with people, it does affect it quite a bit. So it's just switching it up in our brains as well, whether I use social media, emails, which emails can be a little problematic, honestly, because it's a little impersonal, but making sure I do it that way. There's different things I'm looking to do. Hopefully we'll have a chance for me to talk about some of those things later, but it's a little bit more difficult. And can I say one more thing? Because we started virtually right after Easter of last year, and it seemed as though things were, trucking along very nicely, and I was still doing different things because we use Schoology and we have all these online platforms. But that's because the connections had been there before we left for the break. Now we're starting off, we mentioned earlier how it's like you're advertising and you're starting all over. And it's like definitely the fact that people are dealing with a lot of things, whether it's in the home, society, all of the above. And then the whole virtual not connecting, that's another tweak or cod in the wheel, if you will, that's affecting the whole idea of getting the word out.
And I agree. We sort of ended the year on a sort of bizarre momentum because we had built those relationships leading into, March 13th and everything that sort of spilled over into the remainder of the year. And again, we had that sort of momentum and we were finishing things. And so rather than introducing things for the very first time, we were these were culminations and things that we could sort of bring together. And to be quite fair, we were hitting months where so many of us sort of leave those large sort of opportunities to do passion projects and, looking at genius hours and right. the 20%, and it was a lot of fun because we did a lot of research-based support. But you're right, because we weren't initiating or introducing or starting these this year. We were culminating and wrapping it up. I will say, because you mentioned the school librarians who teach a fixed schedule, I have seen some opportunities to advocate for my program. When I taught 6 classes a day, I was important to the 6 teachers who dropped their children off at my room every day. Mm-hmm. I was a hero. And, I think that it's possible they valued what I was providing for their students, but truly what I was doing was providing them with 45 minutes of bliss. So, but now, and of course, what I couldn't do was team teach. I never team taught. I never had a reading club. I never supported any sort of organizations during lunch because I had to travel to my next building to teach another set of classes. And my value was based on what I taught and teaching these students and providing that release time. I don't do that anymore. So all of a sudden, and I had a recent conversation with my principal who talked about the adaptability that the librarians have shown, because we have just out of necessity had to show how we can support people regardless if we're hybrid or we're virtual or we're going back, sort of in a face-to-face, full day situation, which is coming. So, and I think that there are some opportunities for advocacy that for me at least didn't exist before, because now if I'm not teaching 6 classes, first time in 14 years, I'm not teaching 6 classes a day. And there are some possibilities here that didn't exist before. And in some respects, I've talked about these a little bit on the podcast, but I've been able to connect with teachers when they aren't doing their Zooms and say, what can I do to help you with these individual students? What can I do to help you teach this particular lesson, and create those screencasts that they could then share out with their staff. I have tried with using Schoology. I talked about this in December with Tuesday Chambers, that I was using Schoology so I wasn't relying on emails to assault the teachers with my eagerness, but being able to channel some resources to teachers using Schoology meant that I could target grade level teachers in a way that was less direct, and perhaps they could, watch these screencasts on their own time, and individually they'd reach out to me. Quantity, I mean, if you're trying to evaluate how much impact we're having right now, you're right, we're not. I mean, I don't feel like I'm used to seeing hundreds of kids every day. And I know you are too. Hundreds of kids every day. And I look at the numbers, my stats for checking out and how many books are going out. And those stats are fantastic. And I look at what I'm accomplishing now and I'm like, okay, if we were to just smack numbers down and just look at this, no. I look at my lessons on Schoology. Am I making an impact with the handful of kids who choose to watch my screencasts each week? It looks good to my administrators. They can see I'm doing exactly what I was told. I'm posting my asynchronous lessons every week for my grades. My students can access them. I have tutorials for parents. I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to. Does that mean I'm reaching them? I don't know. And so we have had to re-examine how we support our buildings. That's very true. What are I'm curious, what are some upcoming plans for your advocacy committee? Because, it's a new year, 2021, and, it's a time for new beginnings and fresh starts. And we're hoping with the vaccines, we have this pandemic behind us. But what are you looking or hoping to do moving forward with your advocacy committee?
Okay. So one thing that we saw as something that we wanted to work on is we wanted to have more people come into our meetings that we have monthly. And so we had to tweak a few things to try and make it a little bit more alluring. So one thing that Mary Ann thought of was possibly inviting people in to talk about different things, something similar to this, what we're doing right now, but it would be more like we're going to use Zoom. And people will sign in, and then we'll have a discussion about advocacy. So keeping in mind those pillars that we talked about, like when Mary Ann talked about Project Lit and EDI and diversity in our collections, we've invited people like Jared Amato, who created Project Lit, to come and talk to people about how they can do various book clubs and engage their readers in diverse collections. And then when Tim talked about the idea of, looking at what the stakeholders need and going from there, we've invited people from ALA and AASL to come in and talk about those to lead our discussions for our meeting. When I talk about the elevator speech and the idea of partnerships and what can you do for your school library program, in Baltimore County, we have a partnership with the public libraries here. So our students are able to use their student ID numbers and access books, whether it's, before the pandemic, they could actually go to the public library and get a book using their student ID number, but now they can go online, get those ebooks using their student ID information. So how can other school systems, if they're interested, do some type of partnership? So hopefully every month we'll have guest speakers come in and talk about those different things and have an engaging conversation. And then our big thing is that at the end of that, we're going to have some type of action that people can do, whether it's a link to, send a letter to their representative or look at the ALA website to see what they're talking about when it comes to advocacy, just getting that whole idea out about what can people do, because there's definitely something that they can do. And then from there, continue to do our presentations. We decided after we did 2 presentations back to back in 1 month that we were only going to do that once, not again, because that was quite a bit. And then see from there what we're going to do. But that's what we're going to do right now. And don't forget the hashtag MASLMD challenge. We're trying to get more people to take part in that.
Well, and I love that there's a coordinated effort for the entire state of Maryland and your school librarians, because I think that when you realize that you aren't alone in this struggle, I think that we recognize that these are statewide challenges, that, all of us are feeling this need to protect and promote and advocate for not just our own positions, but the positions of all of them in the state that we happen to be in. I love that you give us a lot of, strategies that we can start to look at. And I will say, for me, this is going to seem odd coming from somebody who is a former civics teacher, but I think that passing legislation, and it is such a daunting and drawn out, elaborate process. And I think that it shouldn't require that all of us have this inside understanding on how local and state level legislation is passed. But the truth of the matter is that this is a long process. Sending messages to our legislators is helpful, because so much of our support can be done remotely by showing our support with certain pieces of legislation. I think that it should be an easy way for us to advocate for our program. But I do think that when you look at advocacy and working with our government and passing legislation, it does become very overwhelming for people who on an everyday basis are just trying to do our jobs. Tiki, I am so grateful that you have been able to come and share all your insight with us today. I know that there are advocacy committees in every state, and I think that in sharing these strategies, it really does help each of us re-examine what we're doing to make sure that we are advocating, and as you said, not in a reactive way, but doing this all the time, because we need to make sure that our jobs are seen as valued and that the programs we promote and protect are valued, and not just when somebody mentions that they're cutting the budget. So,
right.
Tiki, thank you so much for joining us. Would you please let listeners know? We'd love to follow you on social media. Would you give us an idea of where we can find you?
So for social media, I'm on Twitter. I actually have 2 accounts. So one of my accounts, the one that I use primarily for school libraries and public libraries, etc., advocacy, is T Loves Books. So TLOVES BOOKS. So that's on Twitter. And then also for my school library specifically, our account for Twitter is at the Lit LC. So THELITLC. And then that's the same thing that I use for Instagram as well, which is at the Lit LC. And then I also have a blog, which I need to update. So that's T Loves Books on Blogspot. And I feel we have a YouTube channel, Facebook page. I I feel like there's something else, but I can't remember. So we have a lot of things that we use.
Well, and I think that it was a point that was made by Amanda Jones when she talked about the importance of social media, is that you are customizing your message for the different platforms so that your audience, the audience that you're reaching on these different platforms is going to be in some cases overlapping, but in some cases you're going to use Facebook for maybe say you're the older and the sort of parent group and the older, and then you've got your Instagram followers and you've got your Twitter followers, and everybody has preferences. And I know that TikTok is up and coming as another way for all of us to share it, and it seems very, very overwhelming. But again, it is so vitally important that we do everything we can to make sure that people see everything that we have to offer in supporting our entire school community. I really appreciate your time today, and I wish you a very happy New Year.
Thank you. And thank you for giving us this chance to share information about advocacy on this platform. We really appreciate it. Happy New Year.
I am so incredibly grateful to Tiki Love for sharing some of her Sunday afternoon with me on what is both for us our last day of break before we return to school in the new year. I also encourage you to make sure you check out the resources in the show notes, because all of us have advocacy challenges. All of us have state organizations which are tackling this. And I really truly believe that the more we share with one another, the more likely we are to really succeed in not just protecting our programs, but promoting them and preserving them. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. And if you really like listening today, please make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcatcher, and you'll never miss an episode. The topic of our next episode is pending, and I can appreciate it. It was the Christmas and New Year holiday, and I didn't do any active scheduling, but I will tell you I've got episodes lined up, so be sure to tune in next week. I promise you won't be disappointed. I hope you stay well and take care of yourself.